What's happening, guys? I'm John Lovell, Warrior Post Society, and today I've got a special guest. Many of you will know him already. Some of you won't and really should, because he's a real dude, does so many different things that are all really noteworthy and worthy of praise. One is he's like power lifter dude. He's just jacked, shredded. He is a podcaster. He's talked to guys like Rogan and Pierce Morgan and Elon Musk. So very, very well-known guy. And he's also a rapper. And he had this really viral moment with this shocking thing he did and story, which is what I'll introduce him with. So we'll start with a fun story, but without further ado, his name is Zuby, and he's joining us today. All right, hey, folks, thanks so much for being with us today. Zuby is with us in studio, and I think the best way to introduce this guy to you is to let him tell you about an event, a weightlifting competition he went in. It was sensationalistic. Everybody heard about it, and it was pretty shocking. Can you tell us what happened to that weightlifting competition?
Yeah, sure thing, John. So first of all, it wasn't a formal competition. Actually, the clip that went viral was just from one of my training sessions. So this is going back almost 7 years ago to February 2019. I posted a video of me doing a 230 kilogram deadlift with ease, and I wrote a caption on Twitter at the time, now known as X, basically saying something like, I keep hearing about how biological men have no strength advantage over women in 2019, so watch me destroy the British women's deadlift record without trying. P.S. I identified as a woman whilst lifting the weight. Don't be a bigot. So at the time I posted this, I had 19,000 followers on Twitter. I remember quite specifically. I put it out there like I put out a lot of posts. I didn't necessarily think it was going to go viral or gain traction or anything. I just thought it was kind of funny. It was hitting on a certain point, which was very relevant at the time, which a lot of people weren't speaking on. And it went absolutely nuts. The video ended up racking up millions and millions of views. I gained tens of thousands and perhaps even eventually 100,000 plus new followers off of it. The deadlift was featured in some of the biggest outlets in the UK, in the USA, in Australia. And it was just this viral moment that went on for initially weeks, and then it kind of went into months once more and more people started discovering me and having me on their platforms. Joe Rogan shouted me out on his podcast after he saw the tweet. Led to me having my first appearance on his show, September 2019.
No, Zuby won the world championships in women's powerlifting. You identified as a woman for a brief period of time.
Yeah, 9 seconds.
To lift. That's all you have to do.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the world we live in.
And it just kept on going. It was millions of people's introduction to me, which is kind of funny because it kind of had nothing to do with what I actually do. Except I guess, there's the fitness angle. But at the time I posted it, I was just a full-time professional rapper, had no desire to get involved in the culture war or be pulled into political conversations or talking about anything goofy like transgenderism. But lo and behold, sometimes the world just pulls you into something and you become an advocate for something that you didn't plan to.
Well, you had a real fun way to make a very clear statement at a very precarious time in our culture. And so a lot of people jumped on that and like, yeah, see, men and women are different. Obviously, he wasn't training for it. He just went in and smashed all the records. But a lot of people were ticked. I mean, that had backlash for you too, right? That changed your life in some ways.
It changed my life in very positive ways. Okay. I know we live in a world where, in the West, people like to talk about male privilege, but it was actually when I identified as a female that, I really blew up and got some traction. So I don't know what to make of that.
I don't know you well. I think we've met just in person one time at a speaking event, but I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to risk saying something to you. And I want you to brace yourself because this might hurt. You're a super ugly girl.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's okay.
When you identify, okay. Even when you identified as a girl, man, it just, you weren't a pretty girl. Hey, quick interruption, guys. I've got an ask. If Warrior Pose Society has ever helped you, I'm asking you to be able to support our movement and join Warrior Pose Society by getting the War Poet app. On the War Poet app, we have all kinds of news. We have exciting shows, travel shows, and all of my classes of training classes of pistol, rifle, Indian dudes from other zip codes with long-range stuff, entangled knife fighting stuff, homesteading, homeschooling. The War Poet app has got tons of content, and the best one, the Rally Point, is my live show that I stream every Thursday night, where you guys are able to call me on the phone. Are you with me?
I am with you, sir.
Bro. We have a conversation and I answer all kinds of questions, but we rally up together as warrior poets once a week, Thursday nights, only on the War Poet app. Get the War Poet app, support us, join the team, join the cause. Hey man, you wear a whole lot of different hats. I mean, I'm very impressed because a lot of folks, they get into kind of stardom and limelight with a singular focus, and that's totally not you. I mean, you're like bodybuilding, powerlifting over here, and then you've got your music career as a rapper. That's like your main thing. And then you do all these speaking events around the world, and you're an author, and you've got a podcast. I mean, like, you are spinning plates. Have you figured out what you want to do for a living or what you want to do when you grow up? You keep spinning plates. How do you manage it all? And speak to that.
Yeah, well, I'm blessed to say that I already do all of the things that I want to do for a living. And I plan to do more of every aspect of it. More music, more podcasts, more speaking engagements, more books. I mean, there's a through line between everything that I do. And what's interesting is it's just different forms of medium. So, I'm an artist and I'm a communicator. Since I was in my late teens when I started out in hip hop and making my music, my goal was always to motivate and inspire as many people around the world positively with my voice as I could. And hip hop and rap was the medium I chose to do that. And over the course of time, in 2019, that's when I started my podcast, Real Talk with Zuby. It's also when I wrote and released my first book, my fitness book, Strong Advice. And I started getting books for speaking engagements. I started getting invited on to talk on various news outlets and podcasts. It's all really the same message. There isn't like, the sort of rap version of Zuby and then the podcast version and then the social media version. Like I'm very consistent and have been for decades on that front. Yeah. And, the world is a complicated place. The world has a lot of darkness in it. And, in the genre of hip hop and rap in particular. So I wrote and released my first album back in 2006. Crazy. This year is going to be its 20-year anniversary. I can't even believe that. And, in the music world and the entertainment world in general, there's a lot of darkness. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of promotion of things which are not wholesome or edifying, right? And I think hip hop and rap in particular are famous for that, right? Like whether you're a hip hop fan or not, a lot of people, rightly or wrongly, associate the genre, not just that genre, but that one in particular, with glorification of violence or aspects of misogyny or talking about drug dealing or drug use and gang stuff and all of this. And, it can be fun and it can be entertaining at times for some people. But I was always like, look, that's not my life. That's not me. That's not my background. That's not what I'm about. Right. So from very early on, from the beginning of my music career, I was always just like, I'm just going to be me. I'm not going to pretend that I grew up in the hood or that I'm a gangbanger or that I'm some big time drug dealer or whatever. Like, I don't do that. Like, I don't even cuss. People ask me, oh, your music doesn't have profanity in it. That's different. And I'm like, well, I don't cuss in real life, so I'm not going to go into the studio and suddenly start using words and, using language that I don't use in reality. And, this was all started back when I was like 18, 19 years old. And I've just been consistent with all that. Like, I'm just who I am. And, I think it's probably also why people can't kind of dig up all sorts of crazy stuff about me and be like, oh, he's a hypocrite because this. It's just like, look, there's been that consistency. Am I a perfect human being? No. Are there things I may have, would have done differently in my life? Like, of course, like that's the truth for everybody. But when it comes to the messaging, it's just the same. So looping back to answer your initial question, as far as I'm concerned, all I've done over the years is I've kind of just expanded my offering. So if I just made hip hop and rap and that was all I did and I was just purely a musician, then I'd have an audience, and I had an audience just doing that. But there are many, many millions of people around the world now who know me and who connect with me on some level and who I've been able to help, inspire, or motivate in some way over the years, who would not have known me and who would not have discovered me if I kind of just did the just stick to music thing. So I'm very grateful that I have the capacity and I've had the ability and the opportunity to, expand into lots of these different areas and to reach people all across the world in various ways. And initially, when I started to gain some of this traction, particularly in 2019, which was this catalyst year, initially I was a little bit annoyed because the focus wasn't like predominantly on my music, right? People wanted to, everyone wants to talk about this silly deadlift video, and they want me to talk about how men shouldn't be competing in women's sports and biological differences between, like, why am I even being pulled into this conversation, right? Like, I'm a hip hop artist. Like, why is this what you want to talk to me about? But I was just like, you know what? My country and the world is going in a bad direction, not just on this issue, but in a lot of things. There aren't a lot of people who seem to be willing to speak the truth publicly about this. So if I'm the person to do it and who, is getting the opportunities to talk on it, then I'll speak on it. And thankfully, all these years later, I've had many, many more opportunities. And I'd actually say most people now don't know me from the deadlift. I think, there are people who that was how they initially discovered me. But there are a lot of people now who I meet and, who I connect with, and they're like, oh, like I had no idea. I had no idea you even did that. Like, I just liked your base tweets, or I started following you during the COVID propaganda, or whatever it might be.
Dude, based tweets for sure. I follow you on social. I don't know if I've ever listened to any of your music. I'm not really interested in the genre except for you. And I think his name's Tom McDonald. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Tom's dope.
Yeah. Anyway, so you guys,
there's
about the message.
There's some good non-degenerate artists that there are some good non-degenerate hip hop artists out there that should be getting more shine for sure.
Yeah. Well, not cursing is quite an extraordinary bullet point for a rapper. Does that flow out of faith? I've seen you online become far more outspoken with faith and family as well. You had a new baby recently and you're married now. And so there's being a dad as well. And so, bring us up to speed on that.
Yeah, sure thing, man. Well, I've always been a Christian. My entire family is Christian. I was raised as a Christian. I was raised going to church and going to Friday school. It wasn't Sunday school. I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and the weekend in Saudi Arabia was Thursday and Friday, not Saturday and Sunday, like we're used to in Western countries. So I went to church on Fridays, and I went to Friday school. Both of my parents are very strong Christians. We used to do like family prayers at least once a week, if not every single night. And so that's always been my moral and religious grounding. Okay. I haven't always walked perfectly with it, and I've certainly had times in where you get more pulled into the world. Like if you're growing up in the UK or in the US or wherever, like the culture isn't necessarily in tune with like sort of true Christian and biblical values. It is to some degree, but then in other ways it's kind of not. So but I've always believed in God. I've always believed in God. I've always believed in Jesus Christ being my Lord and Savior. And I think that as I've gotten older and I've gotten more knowledgeable and I've gotten wiser, and maybe even just like growing in confidence as well, it's certainly something I've leaned more into. I think another part of it, John, is just, how would I put it? I think that if you live in any Western nation, particularly in the Anglosphere, it's gotten to the point where it's like, I don't know how someone could have lived through the past, let's say, 10 to 12 years and deny like the obvious demonic influence and the obvious like moral inversion that's going on, right? Even people who are not, right? Like even people who are not Christians or who don't consider themselves religious, I think society trended in a direction that they probably didn't predict 20 years ago, right? Men can be women, women can be men. There's all this confusion going on, like lots of disastrous stuff. Weird things are being pushed and promoted towards children. People are believing things that they didn't seem to believe 5 minutes ago. And so I think it caused me, and I think millions of other people, by the way, to kind of like lean more into their faith. Like it kind of, I think in the, let's say in the 90s and in the early to mid 2000s, I think, I don't know, society was kind of, let's say there was a somewhat healthy balance between social liberalism and social conservatism, right? Like I think a lot of people, a lot like millennials, Gen X, people older, they'd kind of say, that was kind of like a bit of a golden era where, people were kind of free to do what they want. There wasn't like lots of discrimination going on. Things were just kind of cool. A lot of great stuff was being created, lots of wonderful movies and great songs. Like people were just getting on. There wasn't like weird racial tension. There wasn't some gender war going on, like all of this kind of stuff. Obviously, we also didn't have smartphones and social media. But I think just like in the last 10 years or so, things just got really weird. Like I think from mid 2010s, everyone knows it, everyone feels it. People got a lot more politically polarized. Things got a lot kind of more charged up. And I think there's a spiritual war. I think there has been from the beginning. And it just got to a point of like undeniability. So I think with me just speaking more on my faith kind of more openly and explicitly, like it's always been there. People can go back and listen to even, some of the songs that I was putting out in the 2000s. And to anyone who's listening and paying attention, like it's obvious, this is a guy who believes in God and, is probably a Christian. And now, and also now I just have a bigger platform, right? So there are far more people who are aware of me. So there are things that I may have been saying 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and people kind of just weren't hearing it. And now that I have a bigger platform and there's more visibility, people are getting a chance to hear it more. And I'm married now. I'm a dad now. I've got a baby son. Hoping to have many more kids, Lord willing. That's always been my plan. And as you know, as a parent, like it just gives you an even more clarity and even more focus and even more motivation to push for the things you wanted to see righted in the world. Or at least in your nation and in your society. So, the fire's kind of been there. The foundation has always been there. And it's kind of just increasingly been activated.
It's good, man. 100%. We're in a war and it's politically charged. Isn't it a shame, you're talking about, millennial era and X, and it was kind of a sweet golden era, and you don't really know you're in it until after it's gone. And now everything's so politically charged, and you can't make a single statement about like men and women's sports without, half the population freaking out like you're the devil, or the other half just being like, yeah, it's just plain facts here. And then the governments of the world seem to have really doubled down. I think America really just dodged a big bullet, but the UK took it center mass from my vantage point. And I'd love to hear you speak on this. What is the state of censorship, truth in the UK right now? Because it looks crazy from our standpoint. I visited England last year, and when I touched down at the airport, I half expected to be arrested for, tons of different stuff I put online. I just say whatever I think is true. Yeah. And so I had a contingency plan for all the people I was with of what they would do if I did get arrested, because people were legit getting arrested for saying things that the government was classifying as hate speech. But to me, it'd just be like a fact. And so thousands of people have been arrested for tweets that were considered mean-spirited or homophobic or xenophobic or something like that. And here you are, a bastion of truth, so to speak, of like putting out all that stuff, and you're there. So bring us up to speed on what's happening in the UK. And do you have to walk a bit of a tightrope or curtail some of what you say and how you say it?
Yeah, well, I left the UK in 2021.
Okay.
So I'm a British citizen, but I don't live in the UK anymore now. It's not specifically because of this. But what is the reality of the UK? The first thing I'll say, because I want to give like an honest and a balanced answer. The first thing is that nowhere, I say this as someone who has traveled around the world a lot and continues to, and lived in many different places and met thousands of people, millions of people. Nothing is as bad as it seems on the internet.
That's a good word. Good.
Okay.
Because it looks like a dumpster fire, bro.
Yeah. So, my biggest audiences are in the UK and USA. And there are people in the UK who they spend a lot of time on social media and they spend some time watching the news, and they are terrified to step foot in the United States of America. All right? Because if something is going viral or if something's on the news, what is it? Oh, it's another school shooting. Oh, it's this crazy thing that's going on. Oh, it's this, like, normal doesn't go viral. Normal doesn't make the news. So, when I'm seeing like people in the UK who are afraid to go to the States because they think they're going to be like shot or whatever, or they're going to end up in a civil war, I always try to kind of bring them back, down to reality. Or when I have like my American friends or acquaintances who are like, oh, I can't go to London, like I'm going to get stabbed, or there was a grooming gangs and there's this and there's no free speech and I'm going to be put in jail just for like saying that, men have XY chromosomes, whatever it is. I'm like, look, there's always some element of truth to any narrative, which is why they sort of capture people's imaginations and they blow them up to a degree. So
Right.
Have there been people in the UK who have been investigated or even like arrested or something for like tweets or Facebook posts or something? It's like, yeah, that is real. Just like, are there school shootings and mass shootings and problems in the U.S.? Does that exist? Like, yes, it does. But is it an accurate representation of the country and the society and the kind of everyday reality? No, absolutely not. And in my experience, like this happens with every single country, right? Like there's people who are afraid to go to Mexico because they're worried about, cartels and the violence and this and this and this. And they're like, nope, whole Mexico is a no-go zone. Like I live in the Middle East and I grew up in the Middle East. There are people who are terrified to come here because they think like, oh no, the whole Middle East is, a war zone and there's no free speech and there's no rights and this and this and this. And people kind of have all these like fear narratives. And like I said, it's all overblown. Does that mean there are not legitimate concerns? No, absolutely not. Like our societies, our nations have their problems. Like the UK has many, many, many obvious problems. But the biggest one isn't that like, you're going to travel there and you're a podcaster and they're likely to sort of arrest you at Heathrow Airport because they don't like your opinions or something. Is the probability of that absolute zero? No. But it's probably like 0.0001%. And if it is like a genuine thing, like you'll probably have some type of advanced warning that you as a very particular individual have become like, the enemy of the state or something like that. So yeah, that's kind of how that's just the reality of it.
I didn't plan on pivoting this way, but you went there when you're talking about young men and dating, marriage, kids, and how they'll come up with a real bleak perspective. It seems like they'll become real despondent and they'll either hit anger or despair, and that'll decide whether they go red pill or black pill. But either way, it results in the same thing. Women are dangerous, not worth the pursuit. And if you get one, she's going to take half of your stuff, live with the guy she cheated with in your house while you pay her alimony and he is with your kids. And of like, man, a lot of the legal stuff in the U.S. is set up like that. And I've more recently leaned in to some of the Gen Z arguments regarding of like, hey, the courts are stacked against you. Modern women, they're more than ever before. They're doing the hoe thing, racking up body counts, not learning how to actually respect a husband. And then there's the whole hypergamy thing because it's all online dating. And so if you're like a dude who's like a 4 or a 5 or a 6, you're invisible to gals unless you have something demonstrably, great of like money or a cool car or an amazing job or something like that. And so, for my part, I didn't grow up with that stuff. I wasn't dating during that time, but it looks like the state of dating. I'm leaning in to some of these arguments and where I don't think it's right to say there's no women and marriage doesn't work anymore and kids are a vain thing. Cause that's the best stuff in my life. I don't know about you, but I mean, like I would trade every dime I have for wife and kids. Easy. It wouldn't even be a sacrifice of like 100%. It's the best thing I have in this earth, right now, aside from faith. And young people can't really hear that or see that. So it's worth it's worth it. But holy smokes, the younger man who's navigating the tumultuous sea that is the dating world and looking for a bride, it looks super scary. What would you just say to them?
Look, the first thing I'm going to say is, and I'm glad you're leaning into these conversations and you're hearing people out, because that whole sort of tragic and horrible nightmare scenario that you laid out, there are thousands of men who have experienced that.
Right.
So while statistically it might not be like, oh, okay, like if you've, generally got your stuff together and, that happens then, and, you pursue a relationship that's where you're going to end up. So you do have like the doomers and the black pillars who are like, hey, like that's kind of the standard result. And it's not. But you also have people where it's like that has happened. Like I've spoken to guys where that's pretty much been their story, right? So I have a level of empathy where I'm like, gosh, like, okay, I can see why, if that's what you've been through and that's been your experience to some degree, maybe not every single aspect of it, then yeah, I can see how someone becomes jaded and becomes black-pilled and, writes off the entire institution or so on. I think with with many things, John, there's elements of truth to lots of things. Just like what I was saying, how there's all the positivity and there's all the negativity. And I'm not a fan of like hiding the ball. I think it's important for young guys to think about all of this stuff. I think it's important to be aware of the upside, aware of the potential downside, aware of the risks, aware of just everything that's out there, right? Not to scare them or to kind of force them towards any conclusion, but I think it's good to know, like, look, this is the ideal. This is the ideal, and these are the things that make the ideal more achievable and more probable, and this is how you can very much stack the deck in your favor, and these are behaviors that you can do before, during, to sort of maximize your odds of success. Just like we teach people how to drive, right? We teach people how to drive. You teach people, I know you train people with like firearms and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that you reduce the risk to absolute zero. Like you could be a perfect driver and you can still get in an accident. Does it mean you should never drive a car? No, I'd say that's pretty, I'd say that would be kind of silly if someone concluded, you know what, I'm never gonna drive a car or get in a car because I'm so millions of people a year die in traffic accidents, so I'm never going to get in a car. I wouldn't say that's like a good way to sort of approach life in general. But look, I think I'm glad more of these conversations are happening, and I think it's important to talk about the ideal, and then I also think it's important to talk about the sort of the norm, and also to talk about the disasters. And to listen to people from all different walks, and people who have succeeded and people who have failed, and see what they do differently. The people who are succeeding and seem to be doing it well, how do they do that? Because it's not totally random.
Right.
And to me, this goes with everything. Like if you look at just the USA, for example, say we want to talk about statistics, because a lot of times in these conversations, various statistics come out, and that's fine. So like in the USA, like I think the USA now has like a 40 to 42% obesity rate amongst adults, and about 70% of the population is overweight or obese. Now, if I'm talking to a young man, that doesn't mean that he individually has a 40% chance of becoming obese, right? Right. So something could be like very true at a population level. Even just take everyone and lump it all together, then you can be like, look, these are the stats, these are the data. As long as it's measured fairly and accurately, you can't really argue with it. It's just cool. That's what it is. And then it's like, okay, for the things where I want success, how can I like put myself in the successful minority? For the things I want to avoid, how can I avoid this? And so I think those conversations need to happen, and there needs to be. I'll tell you something on this particular topic when it comes to like gender dynamics and dating and mating and marrying and all this that I wish there was more of. Is, in my opinion, well, I don't even think in my opinion, but I think generally speaking, the people who would be best qualified to speak on this and give advice do not operate in our sphere. They're not on social media. They're not podcasters.
That's right.
They're not
100%.
right. Okay, so as I
They're
said,
happy in their homes, loving their brides, surrounded by kids. They're throwing frisbee in the front yard, laughing in the
exactly,
sunset. And there's
exactly,
droves of those people, and they're killing it on life in a way
yeah.
that other folks who live online have no category for. That's such a good point. All right, keep driving on.
Exactly, right? So if you like most of the like the dating and relationship and whatever advice that comes out on the internet, whether it's on Instagram or TikTok or X or whatever, most of it is coming from people who are not married, often not even in a relationship, and who have never really like maintained a happy, successful, long-term relationship, right? A lot of it is from bitter, angry women or bitter, angry men, or just like, young dudes who don't really know what they're talking. People need to be like discerning. I think that's really important. Like people need to be discerning, and they need to think about who they're listening to and why, and where certain perspectives are coming from, because it ultimately depends on what it is that you want to achieve. If you're a young man listening to this, or even if you're a young woman and your goal is to have a lifelong, happy, stable marriage, ideally with multiple children, then you're probably not best taking advice from like a single, never married person who can't seem to like hold down a proper relationship, whether they're male or female, right? Like they're probably, how can they give you advice? They actually haven't even experienced the thing, right? You should probably take advice from, if your parents have had a multi-decade successful marriage, or your grandparents, or your aunts, your uncles, like whoever it is, like they'll give great advice. My parents are in their 70s. They've done 0 podcasts, right? They're approaching the 50-year mark of marriage, 5 successful children, 11 grandchildren, more on the way. Like they have really, really won in that aspect and many others of life. Like they're not public figures. And how many couples exist around the world who are like that? Like you said, they're just living their life and being normal. Maybe someone should start a podcast where they go around and they like interview just like non-public figures, and they actually have all these type of conversations, because you're not going to get like the best advice, generally speaking, on marriage and relationships from a 30-second TikTok clip or Instagram reel. I don't know, one of these, someone in their car, a woman in their car, like doing their makeup and talking about all of her dating woes and all of her problems with men and whatever. And, misery loves company. So I generally think that in most cases, people aren't intentionally trying to like misguide people. Yeah. But, people can really only speak from their perspective. And I think what's interesting with this subject is everyone feels qualified because everyone has a stake in it and everyone has some form of experience. So no matter who you are, whether you're a male, female, old, young, highly experienced, not married, unmarried, divorced, whatever the situation, like everyone can contribute something to this conversation. It's not like geopolitics or some complicated science subject or history where like people are like, oh gosh, like I don't know anything about that. Men and women, like boys and girls, like cool, like we can all throw our hats in the ring. And so there's just this cacophony of voices and discussions and good advice and terrible advice. And it's all just kind of thrown in there in the same spaces. And that is not helping the scenario. So in terms of something tangible, I mean, for young men, what can I recommend to them? I can recommend grounding yourself in something. I mean, I'd obviously say like, I'm going to assume someone is a Christian. So if you're a Christian and you're listening to this, like really, really ground yourself in your faith and its teachings and its commandments, and know that it's not outdated and it's not archaic. And it truly, truly is like, this is a conclusion I'm increasingly coming to. It's just, it's just right about everything. And actually, if people live by these principles, we wouldn't have all of these woes and all of these problems.
That's right. Yeah.
So there's that. And then also just be about something, like make something of yourself, be useful, be competent. And this takes time. Like it takes time to build your value as a man, to gain respect of your peers, to, become attractive. Sure, you might just be good looking, but it takes time to, whether you're talking about your career, your physique, your skills, your experiences, your knowledge of the world, whatever the case may be, these things take time to build. So I would recommend to young men, just like do your best to take the steps to become the kind of guy that you aspire to become.
That's good.
And that will very heavily stack the deck in your favor, not just when it comes to like, women and relationships or whatever, but just everything in life.
If you're 21 and feel invisible to women out there and you're a 4, girls just don't see you. I bet if you spent the next 5 years getting super jacked, putting a bunch of money away and getting well read, they will see you. They will see you. And the fact that so much of the rest of Gen Z is perpetually living online or gaming. It means everyone else is kind of asleep at the wheel. And if you leapt ahead, you'd find yourself at the front of the pack immediately. So you're invisible today. It's true, but there's something you can do about it. And so that's real good. Hey, you mind if we pivot dramatically subjects? Thanks so much for speaking to all that. But you're a fitness guy, power lifter, take care of yourself, eating right. What have you noticed about American food versus food all over the world? Because I've traveled a bunch of different countries, and the stuff that we eat in the U.S. wrecks me and my wife, balloons us out as well. So we have to watch what we eat here. But it seems like overseas, we can eat whatever we want. Oh, you got a gluten intolerance here in America? Go anywhere else and you'll find I don't have a gluten intolerance. It turns out I'm just allergic to American fake food. What do you see about American food?
America is such a paradox of a country in many ways.
I'd love to hear why you say it's a paradox.
Okay, I'll tell you why. Because some of the most third world, fourth world scenarios I've ever seen in my life were in U.S. cities. At the same time, the USA is, by some measures, the most wealthy and prosperous country in the world. So how can it be, and I say this as someone who has, traveled to every continent except Antarctica and been to lots of places. How is it that like the most despair I've ever seen in any places is in the US? The reason why I brought it up on the food one is because by some measures, the USA has some of the best food in the world. It also has some of the worst.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
And the worst stuff is where you find at every like fast food restaurant. It's at the grocery stores. It's not like Nobu in Vegas.
Yeah. So say you're someone who's like some like hardcore foodie and you want to go to like the best Michelin star restaurants and you have like the best food. Like you will find some of that in the USA.
Yeah.
But you could also just kind of walk around the typical grocery store or supermarket and like 80% of the stuff is just like ultra processed junk full of weird colorings and flavorings and stuff that's like banned in Europe and banned in Australia and banned in New Zealand. And so it's kind of strange. That's what I mean by the paradox. So if you're like really into healthy eating, it's
more Bibles than anyone else and making more porn than everyone else too. Same time.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. That's exactly what I mean. Over 60% of Americans identify as Christian. So when we're talking of all these like social, cultural, political issues, like how can that be the case? Do you see what I mean? Like it doesn't make sense that in a country where a significant majority of the population says, yeah, I'm a Christian, and the most important issue to a big chunk of the population is like being able to kill your own baby in the womb, right? Yeah. Like, wait, what? How does that square? Or if you look at the attitude towards, again, transgenderism and homosexuality and like the push for, men need to be able to marry men and like buy babies and all, like that doesn't strike me as a Christian nation. So the USA has always been a very interesting nation to me. Like it's one of my favorite countries in certain aspects, and I know so many wonderful people there. But it's also just bizarre. It's just like a very jacked up place. The politics is like completely off the hinges. There's so much polarization, and the way people kind of wear their political stripes as a badge, and it's like gang warfare. All of that stuff is kind of strange, man. But yeah, on the food front, it's probably, if you're like a super healthy eater, or you're someone who has like a very specific and unique diet, like you're a paleo carnivore who only eats like grass-fed organic beef that's been, whatever. Like, you can find that in the USA and you'll struggle to find it in other countries. But also there's like a lot of just very bizarre ultra-processed junk that is extremely common there and very abundant, and which a lot of people are eating, which is either non-existent or just quite rare and hard to find in most of the world. So I don't know what people make of that.
I do encourage people to travel, because once you travel, you're able to look over your shoulder and see a little bit more clearly the country you come from. Because when you grow up there and that's all you know, this all looks normal. But then, somebody who's born in the UK, raised in Saudi Arabia, traveled all over the world, and you look at America of like, man, that's a crazy place. And you're like, yeah, right? It is a crazy place. For sure, it's a crazy place.
Yeah, and we haven't even gotten into
now,
the guns and stuff, but yeah.
No, how do you see the gun stuff? Because that's my world, right? How do you see guns? Are you pro gun? You like guns and stuff? Have you shot any?
Yeah, I've shot many guns, including some pretty big ones. Okay, I'll tell you my perspective. I'm pro Second Amendment for the USA, but I don't think most other countries could import that, especially at this stage in time, and it suddenly would work. And also, there wouldn't be the appetite for it, right? In the UK, in Canada, in Australia, even in other countries in the Anglosphere, and then in like Europe, there's almost zero appetite for something like the Second Amendment, right? Like the idea that just, citizens have a right to bear arms, like that makes sense to a big chunk of Americans. I know not all of them. But outside of the USA, like it's such a foreign and bizarre concept, and there's very little like historical precedent or cultural appetite for it. So when it comes to America and Americans, I'm actually like very pro Second Amendment, but that doesn't mean that I'm not someone who thinks that every country should have the same laws, right? Laws are informed by history, culture, demographics, population size, religion. There are a lot of things. There are many reasons why different countries have different laws. And you can't kind of just take what works in Iceland and slap it across 350 million people in the USA and expect it to have the same results as it has in Iceland, because they're just not the same populations. They're not the same countries.
Let me make sure I'm hearing you right. The Second Amendment, as we see it, if you just put it on a country now, because their identity, their DNA, their background is so established, that'd be like oil on water. If it was baked into the cake of their DNA and they had a way to kind of grow out from it, it would work. But now, just being like, and now Second Amendment as Americans understand it, you're saying that wouldn't work well because they don't have a precedent for it. Is that correct?
Exactly. And there would be no appetite for it. So,
Right.
like if a politician in the UK ran on a platform of wanting to legalize firearm ownership for the general population, they would be seen as a complete lunatic by the British public. Like they'd be labeled more than far right. They'd be like the most ultra far right, like fat, like people would just think they're crazy. Like conservatives would think they're crazy, liberals would think they're crazy, libertarians don't really exist in the UK. So like it would be bonkers. I'll give you a parallel. It would be like, I grew up in Saudi Arabia. And in Saudi Arabia, alcohol is illegal. And in the context of Saudi Arabia, it makes complete sense for alcohol to be legal. And it wouldn't really make sense for them to legalize it. Like, why would they? There's no appetite for that. It's completely against the religion of the vast majority of the population. It's not going to lead to anything good and positive. It's not going to help their society. And there's no historical or cultural precedent for it. Does that mean I think that alcohol should be banned in the UK? Or in Ireland, or in the USA, no. Like you, in fact, even if you tried to do that, it wouldn't make sense. People wouldn't support it. It wouldn't work. Even if you could push the law through, like it just wouldn't work. You'd end up creating like a big black market. People would probably riot if you tried to do that. So, different places are different, and that's fine. I think many people have this idea that like every nation should sort of just be the same. and they have this expectation when they travel, if they travel, that like every single place should kind of be the same and have the exact same laws and the exact same culture and the exact same demographics and so on. And it's just like, that's just not how humanity works. There are certain things which are like universal, right? Like murder should be illegal in every country, right? I would hope for every country to have worked out that murder should be illegal. But there are other things. There are other things that are, you know, more gray areas or more nuanced, where, you know, it's going to be informed by the population. Even just the size of a nation can make a significant difference. I was talking before, you know, I mentioned Iceland. Okay, Iceland is about 350,000 people, I think. So the USA has 1,000 times 350,000, whole population, whole country, right?
That's a small state for us. That's
yes,
wild.
Yeah, I have far more followers than there are people in Iceland. So the USA has like 1,000 times more people. So there could be something that like works very well in Iceland, and everyone's kind of on the same page, and it's cool. But it doesn't mean you can just take that and kind of drop it onto the USA. Even the UK. The UK is about 68 million people, I think, across the 4 countries that comprise the UK. And I don't know, India and China are like 1.2, 1.3 billion. So managing a population of like tens of millions versus a billion plus is probably going to look quite different. Not everything scales. Just like if you have like a very small business, and then you have like a giant corporation with tens or hundreds of thousands of employees. So there's companies with like 1 million plus employees. And I assume you cannot run them the exact same way you run like a small outfit of like 1 to 5 people. There are just things you can do. There are things you can't do. So I think nations are just very similar. And then you add on top of that the demographics. You add on top the religions. You add on top the levels of diversity in every sense of the word, the natural resources or the lack thereof, the history, the cultural precedents. All of these things, these are what make nations and peoples what they are. The reasons why you know people might look at the UK, the USA, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and they may just assume that like they're kind of all the same. Like we all speak English. So, you know, I guess like Americans and Brits are, you know, aren't they kind of just the same? And it's like, well, no, not really. If you spend a good amount of time in both countries, then you'll see some pretty clear and significant cultural differences. And cool, it's great that we can communicate in a common language, but people also like miss each other and misunderstand each other because they don't kind of understand the cultural context of things. So there can be something that's like totally normal in America or totally normal to Americans. Okay, I'll give you 2 examples right off the bat. Two things in America that are like very weird to most people around the world. Number 1, the tipping culture.
It's
right?
out
like
of control, man. It's out of control. I go to like my wife's theory is if you go up to a counter, if you stand up to order, you shouldn't tip. And I'm like, 100% you should not tip. And then I'll go there and I've already made a steely resolve. I'm not tipping. I did all my own stuff. I bust my own things. I'm not tipping. And then the screen comes up. 15%, which is a slap in the face. 25, 30%. And I'm kind of like, maybe I should do other and like 0. Or if like, oh man, I already went. And I'm like, then I chicken out and I hit 15%. So anyway, go. So whatever like, stone you're about to throw at us, it's going to hit center of my chest because I'm part of the problem.
Yeah, but it's bizarre. Like, so to most Americans, especially those who have never left the USA, which is, I think, at least half the population, you know, they might just think like that's just normal. And they don't realize, oh, like that's only, like it's only like that here to like that degree. You know, tipping in restaurants exists in most places in the world, but the idea like you're supposed to like tip everyone from the bartender to the, you know, the person who turned around the tablet at your coffee place, like all of that is like very bizarre. Or like not adding tax to the prices. Very bizarre. Right? In most of the world, if it says $10, you pay $10. You don't get to the counter and they're like, oh, that's $11.12. You're like, but it says 10, right? So in most of the world, they just include it all. And so, these are like little nuances. I chose those because they're like everyday things, and they're like they're not political or whatever, but these are just like the little sort of nuances that people notice if they travel. But if they haven't, they might just think, I'll tell you another one. And this is like more significant. And this actually leans more into stuff that truly affects the population. The USA is one of, I think, only 2 countries in the entire world where it is legal to advertise prescription pharmaceuticals directly to the public.
Yeah, that's wild. What do you think about that?
The results don't seem to be good.
No.
So, I mean, the USA is like the most drugged up population on earth. Like the percentage of people, both children and adults, who are on some type of prescription medication or multiple. I think like a majority of American adults now are on at least one prescription medication. Something like 20 to 25% of the population is on antidepressants. The amount of kids who are on,
even when they're babies, it starts of like before you're a day old or a week old, you've already gotten 70 plus foreign substances injected into you. In around the world in other civilized countries, it's like 11. Yes. And so Trump just reduced it down, which was
I just saw that,
fantastic. But it's indicative of like what was happening there, except like big pharma. Is that like a whole nother branch of government here? Are they one and the same? What is happening here?
Another thing that's interesting with it is compared to all these countries, by the way, that I've compared the USA to, like these other Western countries, all of them have a significantly higher life expectancy.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So the USA is a significantly richer country than the UK, both overall and per capita. Americans make a lot more money than British people do.
I think it's because y'all are dirty tea drinkers and we drink coffee. That's what it's. That's why.
That's the theory.
If you want to get ahead, you guys need to put aside your crummy tea and biscuits and start drinking some American full throttle coffee.
But is the coffee also taking 6 years off your life expectancy?
Yeah, definitely, 100%.
Yeah, I mean that's
drive on.
Yeah, because by the way, I'm saying all this as someone who loves America and loves Americans. Like there's tons of stuff I love about the USA. I'm just pointing out some of the paradoxes because, I brought up that term earlier. So there's a paradox between, hey, wait, we're the most like vaccinated, the most medicated population on earth. I think the USA
and fattest. We're the fattest too.
You're not the fattest anymore.
Are we not? Who's chubbier than we are?
No, there's actually quite a few countries.
Who has supplanted us from our very broad throne?
I think amongst like large countries, like let's say countries with over 100 million people, I think the USA is number one. But if you include like smaller nations, there's quite a few people. There's quite a few places that have topped the USA in obesity. I think number one in the world is actually Nauru, which is a country most people have never heard of. I think their obesity rate is over 80% now.
Where is that?
It's one of the small Pacific islands, I believe.
Okay.
It's a very small place, but like lots of those Pacific islands there.
One McDonald's. That's all they got.
Yeah, everyone just eats like really high fat or high calorie processed food. I think because it's an island, like they have to import everything. So like what they have and then I think just like genetically, like the people are kind of predisposed to put weight on easily. So just a little factual tidbit. Someone can fact check me on that one. The reason why I even like talk about like the USA and the UK and the West in the sort of way I do, and sometimes there are people who misunderstand it. Number one, it's because these are areas that I'm familiar with. It's where most of my audience are. It's where I spend a lot of time and so on. So I can speak with a little more nuance and firsthand experience of certain things. But also it's just because like even when I am being critical, and I think this is true of you as well, John, and lots of people in our sphere.
And I invited you to do the paradoxes. I find this very interesting. It's fascinating, and I find it edifying as well that we can kind of see the crazy paradoxical nature that we are of like it's helpful for us to be sober minded and see this. I think our followers will be a bit more gracious.
Sure, I think but ultimately it's because you care and you want places and you want people to be better, right? So if we're talking about, like, I don't know, obesity being a problem, right? It's not good that in the UK and in the USA, so many people are, this didn't used to be a big issue. And over the decades, people are getting, fatter and fatter and more diabetes and metabolic syndrome and all the downstream health issues that come from it. Like, we should be able to objectively just say, like, hey, that's not good. Like, this is not a good thing. This is something we should be doing something about. And in order to do that, like, you have to speak on it. You have to, like, address the bad thing in order to diagnose it and perhaps try to come to some sort of solution. And, I think one of the big problems we've been having across all the Western countries in particular is the overt political correctness to the point where you, like, can't discuss, people don't feel comfortable discussing anything that is real and tangible and consequential, because there's always a risk that somebody somewhere out there may misunderstand them or may be offended or may think that they're a bigot or whatever it is. It's why, like, the whole trans stuff was able to run riot for so many years, because most people don't want to be called a transphobe. They don't want to be considered a bigot or hateful. They don't want to hurt someone's feelings, right? So they'll just, if that man wants me to call him a she, I'm just going to do it because I don't want to upset him. I want to be nice. Some people have called this toxic empathy. Gad Saad has called it, suicidal empathy, all of these things. But it's causing a lot of problems, right? Whether this is letting violent criminals out a million times until they do, something super terrible, or it's, hey, like, you know what, we don't need a border policy. Like, everyone should just be able to come in and it should be a free for all. And then we should give everyone free healthcare and put them up in hotels. And, like, just all of these kind of goofy ideas that are causing real tangible problems. I think so much of it is just downstream of an unwillingness for people to be forthright and to be honest and to be courageous and being willing to just say, hey, no, or like, no, this is not good, or this is not right. And I think, that pendulum is starting to swing. I do see that, but it's been a really, really long time of people just being afraid to say very basic truths, to ask very simple questions. There's this idea that every change is progress, right? So just because something changes and it's not how it was 10 years ago, people are like, oh, that's progress. And it's like, well, progressing towards what? Sometimes change is good, but there are many, many data points that we could look at. We just talked about obesity, right? Where the trend is not in a good direction.
Yep, that's a solid point. Yep, that's not progress.
It's not progress. It's change.
Yeah.
But, it used to be under 10% obese, then it went to 20%, then 30%, and then it hit 40%. That's not trending in a good way. The percentage of children growing up in single-parent families used to be under 10%, then it got to 20%, then it got to 30%. I don't know what the number is now, but the USA actually has the highest percentage in the entire world of children raised in single-parent families. That's not something you want to be number one in. If you look at educational standards, even if you look at what we were talking about earlier, if you look at like marriage, I think marriage rates are probably at an all-time low. That's not good. Yeah. The number of children being born is at an all-time low, not just in the USA, but in most developed countries. Like, ooh, that's not good. Like, that's not a good trend. Regardless of someone's sort of personal opinions or, whether they personally have kids or not, like, can we agree that it's not good that so many people, like, outside of immigration, like, people aren't even replacing themselves? Like, what's underneath that? Like, why? Like, what's happening?
This is all the progress of those who are the progressives. That's your point.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty damning. That's not good.
Yeah.
That's a very, very good point.
Yeah. So I speak on all of these things because I'm like, hey, I think we should be paying attention to this. And I don't know how to fix everything. I'm not saying I have the solution to everything, especially at a population level, but we should care. We should have those conversations. We should be willing to step on some toes and offend some people if need be, to just say like, hey, what's going on here? What are the potential consequences of it? And what can we realistically do to set things in a better direction? And people will have different ideas. And honestly, that's where society and culture and politics really should be. Like, it shouldn't be as insanely polarized and combative as it currently is, in my opinion. It should be mature adults who come from different perspectives and who are mostly sort of trying to achieve the same big goals and they're going to have different ideas on how best to achieve it.
Yeah, what we do know, what we have to know now is that in a desire to not be offensive so that we can be polite, you can't live by lies. You can't take truth and slit its throat in the public square anymore. You have to speak the truth. You can't self-censor. You have to say, you can't just go along to get along, because the peace that it brings is a temporary peace. What it ends up doing is ideologically dividing a country into extremist points that can have no harmony. And you're talking about different countries, and you can't impose a DNA that it didn't grow up with and all of a sudden slap that on, because there wouldn't be an appetite for it, correct? Of like, we have that going on in the US right now, where we really are a house divided. We have the left and the right, and they just have nothing in common. If like we don't even agree on that there is a transcendent truth. And I'm like, that kind of ideological division of like, we have nothing in common with each. We can't even understand each other's arguments. And the other one looks so abhorrent, so loathsome. We don't even want to understand the other's argument because we believe it is like evil incarnate. The left thinks the right is evil incarnate. The right thinks the left is evil incarnate. And so that can't stand. And so you have to have a common bond to be able to keep a country together, right? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I actually have a lot of thoughts on what you just said. The first one is a bit of another paradox, which is that you have this country of 350 million people, probably more if we're being honest, which is by some definitions the most diverse country in the world, with one of the most diverse populations. And politically, you want to split people into two groups. How are there only two? How are there only two parties? In a country of 350 million people, how is it that it's just like left or right? Like that in itself,
a lot of folks would say because two is easier to control the opposition, and it's all a rigged house. That's what the young Gen Zers are like, and I'm not very good at arguing against it anymore.
How does the UK or France or Germany or Sweden have more political parties than the USA does? That in itself is kind of interesting, because I think what happens with that is it naturally leads people to create like a false binary framing. Okay, so many things in the U.S. and in these conversations, they run through the idea of like the left or the right, or the Democrats and the Republicans, and what that can do is it can also make people believe that they're further away than they are in reality. So, like someone who's like a moderate Democrat or a moderate liberal, and someone who's like a moderate Republican or moderate conservative, like they're actually closer on the political spectrum than they are to like the polar ends of their own so-called sides. But because of like the left-right split, you have people, I don't know. Bernie Sanders and AOC should not be in the same political party as Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi. Not in any sane,
point, yeah.
Right? I don't know who's the most like milquetoast Republican or conservative, right? Like they probably shouldn't be in the same party as someone who's like genuinely far right. But they kind of end up being so just because it's like, well, you've got this point in the middle and they're on that side of the fence. So like that's all lumped together and that's all lumped together. And it kind of creates like this fake thing. It's interesting. Like I typically, maybe you've noticed, like I very rarely use the terms the right and the left. Just because, number one, I think it adds to the polarization. But number two, it's like sometimes often when people say that, at a very high level, I kind of know what they mean. But it encourages this like really lazy thinking where like you don't really need to be very specific. And sometimes I don't know, like if someone says, oh, the left is going crazy, I know what they mean. I do know what they mean. But sometimes I'm like, well, how big is that? How big is that basket? When you say the left, are you talking about every single American who votes Democrat? When you say the right, are you talking about every single person who voted Republican? Are you talking about like the politicians themselves, the everyday people, the influencers, the activists, the people who are like more at the extremes? Like, I don't know. Because I hear people say things like, oh, you can't even have conversations with people on the left. And I'm like, well, in real life, I have them all the time.
Yeah. Okay.
And we actually, when I talk to people who are like look, let's be real. Okay, there are some people. There is a small percentage of people who are like genuinely crazy, right? Like they're just gone. You know, the Antifa types, the type of people who think you should like beat people up and, you know, shoot them if you disagree with them politically, right? Like they're far gone. But just like the normal person who voted for Kamala in the last election, I'm sure I can sit down and have a totally normal conversation with that guy or gal, and I have done many times. And actually, if we go into the details of it, they'll agree with a lot of the things I say, and I'll actually agree with quite a lot of the things they say. We may differ on what we think is the best solution or the best policy or the best person or entity to enact it. They might think the government should do it, and I might think that, no, that's something that should fall down to the individuals or families or communities. But we may agree, you know, take something like homelessness or, you know, poor people in general who have always existed and who exist in every country. Every country has poor people. Some people's solution to that, quote unquote, is, oh, okay, like that falls on the government, and what the government should do is take money from the rich people and redistribute it to the poor people, and yay, we're all good. Okay? And then there's someone else with a more right-wing perspective, and they're like, no, like that's not the solution. Number one, like the government sucks at doing that, and number two, it's not moral or ethical to just like steal from the rich people to give it to the poor people, and also it wouldn't be effective even if you could do it. And we've, you know, seen this multiple times. Like, it's not that one of them is like okay with poverty, and like it's not that one of them loves poor people and the other one hates poor people, which is how it's often framed in like, you know, kind of the juvenile way we deal with these conversations sometimes. Actually, they both agree, oh, I have pity on poor people, and poverty is not good. We want to minimize the amount of people living in poverty. But they can have like completely different worldviews and prescriptions for what they think it should be. You could do this with border policy. You could do this even with something as touchy as like abortion. It's generally not the case that like half of the population just wants to like slaughter babies en masse, and the other half hate women and want to control their bodies. Like that's not really, if we're being honest, that's not really what like the argument is from any sane person. I'm very pro. I say this as someone who's very, very staunchly pro-life, but I'm honest enough to not like just straw man the entire other side. Is just like, you know, you just hate babies and want to kill them all. Like, are there some people who are actual extremists on that side? Yeah, for sure. There actually are. There are people who are, you know, quite literally pro-abortion, but like it's such a tiny chunk of the population. So yeah, I just wish, I don't know, man. With all this said, maybe I kind of just. I do my best to try to model how I think some of these conversations and arguments kind of should go for those who are willing to listen. And I just like kind of encourage people to be honest and to be open and to, you know, just have a level of maturity where people can agree and they can disagree without trying to stick labels on each other or trying to like, you know, straw man the other side, or I don't know. There are so many of these narratives, and just in this social media age we live in, again, things are even just more hyped up and more jacked up and more sensationalized. And I can see how, particularly if someone is spending hours and hours a day just on screens, and they're just scrolling and they're getting like all the bad crap from all around the world, not just their own country, just like all over the world. They're getting bombarded with awful stuff all day, and then awful opinions about awful stuff. Bro, trust me, I see how people get jaded. I see how people get black-pilled. I don't think it's the right way. I don't think despair is a solution to anything, but I can see how people get there. So, you know, looping back to how we kind of started the conversation, I do my best in my own small way to, you know, use my voice and use my platforms to at least nudge people in some direction of positivity and inspiration and truth as well. And also just to encourage people to think critically, think for themselves. You know, don't be a slave to the government. Don't be a useful idiot to whichever, I don't know, influencer or activist or politician who wants to like, you know, push you in whichever direction without your brain switching on. I encourage people, you know, listen to people, talk to people, you know, use your brain. And I don't know, man. I'm just doing my best here.
That's good. I think it's hard. It's really hard for me as well. to extend a little bit of goodwill and an olive branch to those on what would be classified as a political left. Because as you said earlier, when we first started talking, the world in America is very, very polarized in a spiritual battle between good and evil. You have like, and it's wild. And if you sat down, just somebody who typically would have voted for Kamala, and you just asked these questions, I'm like, in terms of economics, they are socialistic programs. I'm free market capitalism. First Amendment, hate speech should be punished, and we're like, hate speech is protected. Guns, no guns. get rid of guns. Babies, women's choice. It's like, regardless of what it is, the conservative has certain values and certain ideas, and it's almost like the right, it seems, and maybe this is just more of an online phenomenon, they all lockstep monolithically are with a package of values and understandings and epistemology. And the left seems to be that way as well. You're saying, though it's not actually hard in your experience, because you've talked to a lot of people on the other side of the line, and whereas they may arrive at that result, they have a moral and good reason for arriving there. So you can still have conversations and discourses. This is what Charlie Kirk was able to do so successfully.
Absolutely.
Though they ideologically disagreed on virtually everything, he was able to extend an olive branch and make a safe, neutral place, demilitarized zone, to have a conversation. The problem is now it's reached such a critical mass over there. They're just trying to kill us. They're trying to kill. We're not trying to kill them, but I mean, like J.D. Vance just had rounds shot through his window. Where do you go from there? What if, like, all right, ready, 3, 2, 1, fight it out? I'm like, that can't be it. Let's have discussion. Let's have discourse. So
yeah,
give us
sure.
some calm thinking and cool hands in this tumultuous moment.
Yeah, sure thing. And you know, I'll tell you what's fascinating is I've had conversations with people who are more left leaning, and I don't even mean like, and I don't mean like, you know, generally speaking, they're not like crazy, like extremist progressives or something like that. But something that's really fascinating is I've had conversations with people on that side of the aisle where they say all the things that people on the right tend to say about people on the left. They say the same. It's just that it's inverted.
Isn't that funny? Yeah.
Right. So there are people on the left who think that, that the right has they're too far gone. Like we can't even talk to them. Like they support this, they're pushing for that. They're trying to, again, you have to keep in mind there are people whose their programming for the past 10 years has essentially been that Donald Trump is like a fascist dictator and that he's genuinely racist, he's an actual white supremacist and so on. So when someone is running on that framework, which I would say is a faulty framework and it's not accurate, of course they think that, oh my gosh, like these millions of people who vote for him and who are supporting all of this and so on, and then they'll go to, January 6th, the deadly insurrection, and like they've got like their own narrative. And it's always just fascinating to me. Like, I'll tell you what it's like to kind of take some of the heat out of this. It's a bit like if you talk to like a lot of the young Gen Z men and you're talking about like dating and gender dynamics and so on, and you're listening to their issues and grievances with women. It's just like an inversion of talking to lots of, a younger woman and listening to her grievances with men. And lots of men will say like, I have so many awesome, successful, and cool friends, and like even they're struggling. And then like the women will say, I have all of these like amazing, beautiful friends, and like they're still struggling to like get them. And I'm just like, how can this all be true? How can it be true that like there's all these like amazing young men out there who are looking for wives, and there's all these amazing young women out there who are looking for husbands, and they're just totally missing each other. Either they're not as amazing as they think they are, or like they're just in totally different parts of the world or the country or something. And I don't know. It's a bit of a strange one. Look, I'm I'm far, far, far more conservative, certainly by Western standards, than I am liberal, let alone progressive, let alone socialist, right? Like like I'm way, way, way to the right, certainly economically, than like the vast majority of both the British and American populations. It's why I live in a country without taxes. But I don't know. I think maybe the art of conversation has been lost a bit. Because I'll tell you why I say this. So it's kind of interesting because you brought up like all these headline issues. I'll give you like two more great examples because we touched on them earlier. Okay, the USA has the First Amendment. Right. Okay, so it's the only country in the world that truly has that, by the way. I think South Africa actually may have pretty much the equivalent. But most countries have some type of speech laws. They differ from country to country, but almost every country in the world has some form of hate speech or speech that's not allowed that you could be prosecuted for. So look, most people don't want to hurt other people's feelings too much. So if someone is just like, you know what, there should be hate speech laws. You shouldn't be allowed to say certain like extremely egregious, racial slurs, I don't know, homophobic slurs, things that are just like, things that most polite people, let alone Christians, would be like, yeah, like that shouldn't be coming out of anyone's mouth. If we agree that, it's very easy to see how someone would just be like, okay, so why don't we just ban it?
Yeah.
Right? If we all agree that it's bad, why don't we just ban it? And this is what I mean. It's like the reason why I would argue, you shouldn't on lots of these things is it takes more conversation, it takes more nuance, it takes more layers. We talked before about gun violence. Like every day I don't know how many tens of thousands of Americans get, shot and murdered every single year. It could be gang shootings, it could be mass shootings, it could be individual suicides, it could be, just individual homicides and so on.
Right.
It's a much higher number than lots of other countries. So
pause on it real quick. If you take away suicides, which is most of our gun deaths are suicides, and they're counted in that. And I totally think that's a skewing statistic. So as soon as you take suicides out, it drops by a significant margin. And then if you take gang violence out, it drops again way down. And then when it's justifiable homicide, like cops shoot somebody who tried to shoot them first, then it drops again. And so as soon as you get there, you actually find U.S. per capita gun violence is quite low. And then if you just reviewed a few left-leaning cities, which have outlawed it again, where most of the shootings are happening, like Chicago, Illinois, it's a concentrated mass there. And so the perception is people are getting shot up all the time. I'm like, no. It's extremely safe everywhere you go, except for a few liberal cities around the U.S. Yeah. So sorry, go ahead. It's into my sphere fine. There. Go ahead.
I know I did, and it's intentional. And all of what you said is true. And nonetheless, even if you were to exclude lots of those things, it still has a higher shooting rate than, I don't know, say the UK or Canada or Australia, right? So sure. I already told you I'm pro Second Amendment, right? But you can see how someone would just be like, especially in the heat of a moment of like one of these atrocities that happens, right? A school shooting, a mall shooting. It's not hard for me to fathom why someone is just like, just ban the guns. Like obviously, right? Ban the guns. And if you are a Second Amendment advocate or you support the Second Amendment, let's say, it's a bit of a conversation to explain, to go even what you just brought up, even what you just did right there, right? Like that took quite a lot of words. That takes statistics, that takes nuance, right? It's a lot easier to just be like, just ban it, just get it. So
sure.
That's kind of my point. So, but that's why, the work we do and what we do is important, because it's like, look, I know you're like a very, you're like a real, like a very staunch, like, 2A advocate. Like that's your world, right? Like that's your world. And if I were like a uncharitable, like crazy leftist type, I could just be, like you just don't care about, you don't care about, people's lives. You don't care about, right? And I hate, that's the kind of discourse that just needs to go. Just like whole, I'm going to just assume that the reason we have a disagreement is because you hate this demographic or you don't care about this whole demographic of people, or you want people to die, or anything like that. Like there are I'm not American, but I've met a lot of Americans. I've met a lot of people from every country. There's no country, there's no city, there's no place I've been to where like I'm just meeting a bunch of people who are like, oh, you know what? Actually, I'm cool with, like, actually, I'm okay with murder. I'm okay with people. Like, that's not a real political position. And I think the conversations could be a lot more healthy if people were just a little more charitable in that regard.
That's such a funny point, because somebody who would lambast me about hating people because I want my guns, they would completely build a straw man, not realizing that, no, I carry guns because I love people and I don't want them killed by guns. So it's actually the exact same impetus, but coming to a different conclusion, because I recognize bad guys have guns and they're not going to give them up. And if evil has a gun, goodness should have a gun too, so that they can protect. So even when I carry guns daily, it's not because I love guns. I actually don't really care that much about guns. I don't name them and clean them all the time. And my heart rate doesn't quicken when I see blue steel. I don't care. I'm so over it. I'm over it. I don't care. Guns are just a tool. I look at guns like I look at hammers, wrenches, and screwdrivers. There's just a tool. It's a means to an end. And the end is I love people and I want to see them protected. That's it.
Yes.
And so it's actually the same driving motivation of, well, I don't want people shot, so ban guns. I'm like, well, I don't want people shot. Keep guns. So it is quite a hilarious talking past each other and opening up conversation like you're espousing now, and like Charlie Kirk lived and died doing, would go well with Americans. I had another thing I wanted to, last thing I wanted to ask you before I let you go.
John, before that one, I just have a thought that I need to get out because it's so relevant to the subject.
Oh, come on, bring it. Let's go.
Which is that if you think about it, nobody's actually anti-gun. People just differ on who they think should be allowed to carry them.
Yeah. Yep.
Right?
That's good.
If you actually think, like, that's actually what the debate is, because people aren't trying to, people aren't trying to like disarm the police or, disarm the military or whatever. So actually the whole gun debate from country to country is really about, okay, who do we think should be, we all agree that good guys should have guns, but does good guys include just normal citizens? Is it just police officers? Is it just certain type? In the UK, it's just certain types of police officers. Everyday police officers don't carry guns, but like there are, a lot of Americans have this idea that there's like no guns in the like UK police force, which is like complete nonsense. It's just like the everyday beat cops don't carry them, but which
is crazy to us. That's so wild to us, by the way. But go ahead.
Yeah, but also the citizenry is not armed, right? So in the U.S., like there's the game theory thing, right? So because so many people are armed, whether you're law enforcement or you're just an everyday person who wants to protect themselves, then you also need to be. But like I live in Dubai, I live in the UAE right now, and like I don't know, like no one who lives here would feel like, oh, I need to like carry a gun for protection, because number one, there's almost zero violent crime, but also it's just like, well, like the game theory doesn't kind of kick in, because it's not like everyone you're walking around or a significant percentage of them are armed or something like that. Like if you're doing a traffic stop in the UK, a traffic stop in the UK is not generally dangerous for a police officer, but a traffic stop in the USA could be very dangerous for a police officer, right? So it's just different. Anyway, we can round it out. I just wanted to make that point that even people who say they're against guns, I'm like, no, you're not. You still want people carrying them. You just want it to be the people you approve of.
Thanks so much for all your time. I have immensely enjoyed this, because when you're meeting somebody out and about like we did at, if you're setting up your booth and getting ready to go on, I just come off speaking and I've got my family I'm wrangling, I'm about to kick out, but to be able to really open up your head and, get some good wisdom from you has been really, really wonderful. So one last thing I wanted to ask, if you had just a couple minutes to speak to the young men particularly, because I'm really honing in on Zoomers, Gen Z, young men. I care about masculinity. I care about our future. So those guys who are in their teenage years, all the way up to almost 30 years old, who feel lost, who feel lied to, and who feel angry or any kind of despair, guys who are kind of tipping into that red pill or black pill camp. What would you say to them if you could address them directly?
The first thing I would say is I think I actually empathize and sympathize with a lot of their feelings and complaints and concerns. I think that's the first thing to acknowledge. There are things that are going to be easier for them compared to previous generations, and there are also things that are going to be harder for them. And some of those things are actually very meaningful. I would say that I would actually say to like focus on yourself, at least for this kind of season of your life, and don't look. You can't fix the entire world or nation or everybody in it, but you can make very significant progress with yourself as an individual. So, if you're out of shape, get in shape. Right. First things first. Probability wise, you're probably out of shape. So start going to the gym, do strength training, get yourself down to a healthy body weight, improve your eating, your lifestyle, your exercise, all of that stuff. Get that in order. When it comes to career or business, find the intersection between what you're interested in, what you're good at, and what other people want or need. Right? If you're talking jobs, careers, starting a business, I don't know who's listening, but find where that intersection is and get good at something. Become competent at something. I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe you're an awesome chef. Maybe you're an awesome entertainer. Maybe you've got a law degree and you're good at law. Like whatever the thing that you're good at, which is valuable to the world, hone in on it and get good. It takes time to become competent at anything. I would say, morally, root yourself in the faith. Like there's so much wisdom in the Bible. And I know for young people, especially at certain stages, it can be easy, even if they consider themselves Christian, it can be easy to overlook that or to be pulled more into the world and what the world is telling you and what YouTube and social media is telling you and what other people are doing around you. But there's just this like immovable, eternal truth that's in biblical values and teachings, which if you apply to your life, it will serve you well in the long run. So root yourself in those things. I'm just going to give those three for now because I could do. I'll tell you what. If you go to realtalkwithzuby.com, I have an article, a long form article I wrote called "My Honest Advice for Gen Z Men." Maybe I'll send you a link to it, John. You can include it in the notes.
100%. We'll put it down below in the comments.
Yeah, it's a whole article. Yeah, it's a whole article actually with me thinking very specifically about that demographic and thinking about what I would tell and what I do tell young guys who are in that phase of life. So those are three that I bring up right now on the podcast. Get yourself in shape, get good at something and become competent, and really lean into your faith and the teachings of the Bible and apply them to your life. And check out that article if you want more specific and detailed things from all sort of different areas of life.
Zuby, I think you are a fantastic older brother that Gen Z should be listening to and looking to. Where are all the places they can find you?
Sure thing. I'm on everything at Zuby Music. That's ZUBY Music. You can find me on X, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all of them the same handle at Zuby Music. And I brought up my site, realtalkwithzuby.com. I write articles there as well, and it's a newsletter that people can subscribe to. So to avoid overloading people, remember those ones at Zuby Music on social media, and check out realtalkwithzuby.com.
Zuby, if you make it to the U.S. sometime in the future and you find yourself in the great state of Georgia, I want to bring you up for some coffee and some fun firearm stuff. So This is my formal invitation. Thanks so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate you.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it, man. Likewise.